Hi everyone. On Tuesday night, me and Tim C played for Ashton against Charlton 5 to try and get some points in the South East Lancashire League. And there was two very instructive games which I'm going to cover. First of all, I'm going to do my game on board 1 against Stuart Sumner of Charlton. I hope you take something from this game. I was white and kicked off with d4, knight f6, c4, g6, and now f3, which I'm sure you've seen many times because it's that amazing. And my opponent said after the game that he's a Grunfeld player, and this system is to discourage the Grunfeld. I mean, you can still play d5, but it's a completely different ball game because there's more minor pieces on the board, which suits my style more. But the Grunfeld is usually characterised by like more open positions, whereas the King's Indian, which occurs in this game, and it transposes into the Saemisch, this is more closed positions. So as a result, you can see him struggling. I got bishop e3, planning the battery on the c1 to a6 diagonal, a6. So as you see, black's going to be playing some counterplay with b5 at some point. Knight ge2, and here black's knight should really go to c6, because then when he does, like in the game, it goes rook b8 and rook e8, and the knight belongs to c6 because that's like the Panor variation, and then there's an e5 as well. But instead, he goes knight bd7, queen d2. Now goes rook e8. So one of the ideas of this is, I think, is I mean, in this position, if I go bishop h6, say with my move, then I'm forcing the dark square bishops off, because if bishop h8, then I win the exchange. But after rook e8, black's got the option of retreating the bishop to h8 and avoiding this trade. But here I started hacking with g4, and I was still bashing out moves of theory, because the time control was something like an hour for 30 moves, which is pretty fast. Knight b6, bad move, blocking the b pawn, which black needs for counterplay. Because the thing is that I'm going to castle queenside and attack with kingside pawns, so black needs to create some counterplay on the other side of the board to keep me distracted. Or maybe he can get through his attack first, because I've got a weakened queenside. Knight g3, protecting c4 with a bishop, and preparing a h4 h5 push. Rook b8, all pointless. h4, g5. This move I thought was always bad because it blocks up the diagonal, but actually it's good in this position because of the knight's lack of squares. Because if knight h5 you take it, and if knight fd7, then you go c5, forces the knight to a horrible square, and castles, and look at that, as I've highlighted. Black's pieces are all spectators, all cramped together, and white's just going to push the h-pawn and attack at leisure, and this is very strong. Instead I went h4, e5, finally fighting back, d5, knight fd7, moving pieces away from the side which is being attacked on, castles, queen f6, threatening f3, but I can easily deal with it with bishop e2, and I'm threatening also bishop g5 to trap the queen. I was having a look at sacking the pawn with h5, but it should provide enough compensation, but there's no point to like make it complicated when I've already got a healthy space advantage, which isn't going away. It's a static advantage rather than a dynamic one. So bishop e2, trying to trap the queen. So queen e7, h5, knight a8, maybe finally playing some counterplay with b5, but the knight is on that horrible square. Takes, and here you might notice that I can go bishop a7, which I'll admit I did miss, but I don't think I would have played it anyway, because I've said in these positions that the e3 bishop is very important. I mean, it gives white a winning advantage, but I thought, what's the point swapping off such a powerful bishop, my good bishop, in return for a rook that's doing nothing? But even so, bishop a7 probably should have been played, but I missed it anyway. It's one of those counterintuitive moves. I was only really thinking about hacking him up. But bishop h6 is fine. b6, dreadful move. Black needs to start counterplay with b5, opening some lines up. Even if it's a pawn sack, the bishop's going to do nothing on b7. If bishop takes h6, then rook takes h6, queen f8 and rook dh1 with strong h-file pressure. So I went bishop takes, queen takes, rook dg1. You see white's rooks are now knifing through these files. Bishop b7. And now I went the tactical shot knight f5. Obviously taking is nonsense because of that, where the queen is lost for inadequate compensation. So queen h8. Queen f7 is much stronger. No, not queen f7. Queen f8 is stronger. Now there's I think actually I had a look at knight h6 check, and it's the strongest move by quite a lot according to Stockfish. But I hadn't calculated further enough. Let's have a look. The variation. Check. Now f4 opening the f file up. And the best move for black is to take. Now if the queen takes check, you see that the knight h6 is covering f7. So king e7, but now rook f1 is strongest because queen f7 check allows the king to escape to d8 and then c8. Rook f8, check, king e8, takes, and rook f1. And white's attack should be overpowering here. Black's pieces on the queen side are doing absolutely nothing, and the attack should win here. The rook's being developed with tempo as well. Also possible maybe is a pawn stack with e5 to clear the e4 square was interesting. Instead I went the weaker queen g5, which has some threats, like it's preventing the knight from being taken, but now he goes queen f6, and in this position I obviously don't want to trade queens because I've got the attacking initiative, and trading queens would make black's defensive job easier. So queen h6, knight f8, and now the attack's hard to find an attacking plan because, as Ben Larson once said, it's very hard to checkmate the king when the knight's on a bishop square, and it's hard to find a winning plan now. I was having a look at there's also there's rook h3 here. The point being is that the knight can't be taken because of the pin. So let's say queen f7, knight e3, rook e7, and rook gh1, and white's position is better, but there's nothing immediately conclusive. I think knight h6 check was a killing move. So I went g5, queen f7, knight e3. So that's the manoeuvre I was planning. Queen g7, trying to get the queens off desperately. Queen h4. And now I haven't got an amazing attack, but I've got a really good space advantage. Black's pieces on the queen side are doing nothing, and it's a very strong position this. Now my opponent plays bishop c8, which is probably best because I was planning the manoeuvre I highlighted in the previous move, which obviously if he plays it now he's just going to take it off. So bishop f1. So my idea is to get rid of that bishop so I can move the knight to g4, and also this bishop's doing absolutely nothing. Queen f7. My opponent seems to be obsessed with this f3 pawn, which is backward. Queen f2. Again I looked at sacking it, but nothing too good. Bishop d7, wasted move because now bishop h3 forces it off, and now he takes, rook e7, because I might be planning to play queen h4 and rook h1, so he'll have 4 pieces on h7 to my 3, so I can't really do much because I can only get 4 pieces on it once the knight comes into f6. Also he needed to, he could move the c pawn, play the other rook to b7, so h7 is should be defended easily. I carry on my plan of knight g4, and now he plays queen f4 check, which is very like Patsy check, because as I've highlighted that once the knight comes to f6, then black's queen's got no squares, and rook g4 or rook h4 is going to trap it, and in fact this is a losing blunder, or it should have been. I played king b1 instantly, but king c2 wins on the spot, because now it's covering the d2 square. If you notice that when I play king b1, the queen's got the d2 square when I play knight e2, but with king c2 it's covered. And now there's no defense for black here, and he's losing the queen for a rook. In the game though, he gets a rook and a knight for the queen, and because of the blocked up position it's hard to win. So he goes king h8, If he tries knight d7, trying to clear the f8 square for the queen, then there is check, king h8, and now the killing move, knight f5, blocking the queen's escape. If it's taken, then rook h4 traps the queen. After takes. Black's got a rook and knight for the queen, but white's pieces are too strong here. The queen and rook are too strong, and the g-pawn is dangerous. So white's winning. It's an improved version of the game, this. King h8. Now after knight f6, black's only move is to play rook f7. The point being is that when I trap the queen with rook g4, which I did, he can take the knight in f6, and then he can take my rook. So he's got a rook and knight as compensation for the queen. Knight e2, kicking the rook off an active square, and bringing the knight to a better position with tempo. Rook f7. f4, maybe a bit premature, but I need to open the position up to have any winning chances. Takes. Now queen d4 check is threatened, so king g8. Queen e3, defending the knight so I can move it. Rook e8. Now black's still getting some counterplay, and there is, but I don't think there's really any compensation for the queen loss here. Knight e2. Rook fe7. Knight c3, and knight d7. You see that I've got two holes on c5 and e5, and e5 is a permanent outpost, but I can stop the knight coming to c5, which would because if the black knight comes to c5, then my pieces can get tied down to e4, so I stop it. He was knight e5, and then I got queen e2, covering the c4 pawn and the g4 square. And in this position, white should win this, but it's not really like conclusive. Black's got a rook and knight at queen, and if that a8 knight can get into the game, then there might be some drawing chances. But he lashes out with c5, which is a blunder. Better was rook f7, after which I could play. But after this, I can win with the continuation. c5, takes, queen takes a6, knight b6, and d6. And this pawn should decide the game, because it can't be taken because the knight in b6 would fall. So white's winning that, but it was not as easy as the game, because after my opponent lashes out with c5, probably getting really tired of his massive space disadvantage, I take on passant, knight takes, knight d5, and here my opponent resigned here, and I've highlighted all like the problems. There's an immediate fork threatened on f6, which also means the e4 pawn can't be taken. e6 and h7 can be attacked by a queen switch to h2, and in fact there's no way for black to stop the fork without dropping the h7 pawn, which is just losing. It's the problem with black in this game is you don't get enough counterplay, and the knight on a8 just does nothing all game, and white's playing material up, and also he gets his queen trapped. But the game had to be won, and also if you have a look in final position, if you find any kind of defense for black, then please put it in the comments box, but there isn't any, I don't think. But anyway, next video I'm going to do Tim C's game from this match. That's also instructive. It should be on later tonight. I might put it on after club. But anyway, please leave any comments or thoughts. Remember to like, subscribe and all that. Thanks for watching, and see you on YouTube.